Okay, so utopia. You know, I intended to do this a long time ago, and I've had, well, whatever, I'm not going to bother with the story of why I haven't taken the time to make this video until now. But part of it is that utopia, I came to discover, is just an odd thing to consider too much. I guess what it comes down to is what I would say would be a perfect society. It would have to be an anarchy guided by agape. And there's a couple of problems I was having with it as I thought about it. One is, I don't think we as humans we're really going to get there ever, but that's fine. Utopias are supposed to be fictional fantasies that, you know, we use to give us a trajectory, right? But also, it is my nature and my belief as far as this idealism goes that I can't actually, in good conscience, describe a utopia because it has to be done by everybody who's participating in it. And I'm just a person, so the effort I would have to put in to make a weird fictional universe, it's like, it's defeating the purpose of what I wanted to try to use this video for, which was really kind of using a utopia just to have it as an excuse to sort of underlie what I would call my, you know, oh, wow, airplane going by. We'll let that go for a minute. I'm surprised it sounded as loud as it did on the microphone. Maybe it doesn't sound that bad to you guys when, I don't know, I'll see when I edit this. Maybe I edit that out, maybe I don't. Okay, anyway, so I'm not going to be able to come up with a decent utopia, sorry. I just have to apologize for that. I mean, you know, there are things like Star Trek is semi-utopian, right? I mean, obviously it's not a perfect society, but, you know, free energy, right? Free energy, no poverty. So I decided what I would rather talk about is what I would like to see fantasy-wise in a society. And I don't think these things are really all that unrealistic. These things I do believe are potentially possible as opposed to, you know, love is the law kind of anarchy. I just think we're too petty, shitty, short-sighted. And this isn't me being, oh, you people are so evil, it'll never work. It's like I am just as screwed up and as evil, you know. And that's the problem. We're just a messed up bunch of hairless apes, really, right? So what do I want to see in the world? Let's just start off with some basic features I would like to see. Well, let's start off with governance, just in general, right? I mean, obviously anarchy, it was like, well, you don't like government. And it's like, well, no, I don't, but I also understand that, again, we're screwed up little children, and we can't behave ourselves, so we need somebody to say, hey, stop doing that, you dick. So here's the thing, you know, we have all these nice catchphrases like, you know, government of the people, by the people, or was it of the people, for the people, and by the people? Is that the big thing? How about we simplify that? Governance is us taking care of ourselves. Period. That's it. That covers the whole fucking thing. That's security, whether that's military or constabulary. That's infrastructure, roads, sewage. That's healthcare. That's education. That's businesses and practices, right? That's us making sure that we are taking care of ourselves. There's no more territory to find and put flags on. And this nationalism nonsense that we still cling to is like, what is that for? The only people that really helps are the people who wear the boots, who put it to the rest of us. And then there's a whole collection of people who argue about, they try to guise themselves in an idea of what they'll call progressivism or something like that. And it's like, they're just looking for their chance to wear the boots. And none of that interests me. Alright, so the features. I think we gotta have something that is akin to universal basic income. I know a lot of people go, oh, how do you afford that? Well, I'll get to that in a minute, I guess. But whether it's money or, I mean, that just seems to be the easiest way to do it, is just with money. But we need a means of making sure, well, let me back up a second. Why do I think we need a universal basic income? I mean, there's a lot of people who've been talking about it, especially given the current political, well, it's here in the U.S., this is the year 2020, it's an election cycle. And so topics like that have come up. Usually the motivation for it that people are talking about it from has to do with automation, and automation basically killing certain, well, jobs, right? Just there's lots of jobs that are just going to disappear. So we need to have some means of everybody being able to have, to not die and not all be homeless and, this kind of thing. I think it's more fundamental than that. I think we should just stop shitting on each other. And if you're born, you didn't ask to be born. You got here. You woke up here. You just find yourself here. And then, right? So what are we going to do? We all have that same problem. So how can we collaboratively and cooperatively say, we're all in the same boat. We're all on spaceship Earth. So we need a means of guaranteeing, making sure that we stay alive. And the reason I think that it is it's fundamental to what civilization, the point of civilization is. I mean, let's just imagine I'm a spaceman who comes from another world and I'm looking at the planet and going, what are these hairless apes doing? Civilization is a means of us keeping the biggest gene pool that we can afford to keep alive, because the way we survive, we're not doing rundown hunting anymore, right? We're not, which was largely tool usage and the fact that we have a tremendous stamina, right? But we're not doing that. We figured out how we could herd, we could make friends with dogs, and we could grow crops, and then, boom, it snowballs from there, right? An entertaining video to go watch is, I can't think of the guy's name, Bill Wirtz or something like that, does the history of the whole world, I guess, or something like that. It's entertaining, but, he does a reasonable job at a cartoon way of oversimplifying the history of, us humans. But, so the point is, we survive as a species. Our survival strategy is not like germs, right? Germs just do it by sheer numbers. Boom. Just overpopulate, same, a lot of things do that. Insects do that. Turtles do that, right? When the sea turtles, when they lay their eggs, they lay way more eggs than, there really is going to represent their population, because a tremendous amount of them are going to die. So in order to, make sure that an appropriate number survive, they use numbers. As hairless apes, that's not what we do. We use intelligence and tool usage, right? Intelligence and tool usage lets us develop a thing we call civilization, which lets us have a tremendously large gene pool, right? It's way bigger than we ever had as hunter-gatherers. So you look at it kind of from that kind of perspective, okay, then we should be able to marshal our resources in such a way that we keep the broadest number of people alive as we can, because that gives us a tremendously broad gene pool, which means we increase the odds of there being smarter, cleverer people who will come up with better tool usages that will let us keep this thing going. The problem is, you can't do that under the notion that it's going to be perpetual growth, right? There's only a certain number of molecules that will work in supporting our kind of life, right? And it's not just about having TVs and satellites and cars and, fancy houses and this kind of crap, although that's what we tend to do with it, but, it's more to it than that. But we need to start recognizing how we're using our resources, and we need to realize that everything that you have started off in the commons. Everything was a mineral or a tree or whatever, or, we should, I think, include ourselves in the commons. We're just critters, really. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as this noble beast. What is it? Well, whatever, I was going to try and come up with some literary references, like, in Hamlet, how noble, blah, 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 but, my memory's not working so well, so let's just avoid that nonsense. The thing is, we survive because we survive. Government is a tool that we use, right? And it should be us taking care of ourselves. Period, the end of the thing. Right? So we need something like, okay, so let's get back to my nuts and bolts. A us taking care of ourselves. We need something like a universal basic income. Healthcare should be a human right, period. Education should be a human right, period. If you're not thinking like that, then you're being an idiot and you're trying to shit on people. And I don't have patience for that anymore. I mean, how can you pretend to have any kind of concern, care, empathy, compassion for other humans, and not just look at. We need to make sure that we're all smart enough dealing with what our challenges are, and it's not about training workers. It's about making sure that we're all smart enough to deal with the world we find ourselves living in, so that we can do it collaboratively. That's how we survive as a species. We do it collaboratively. So how can we make it so that we all live cooperatively and collaboratively better together? Well, again, okay, so there's the thing. I would also like it to see if education and healthcare, I would like to see them more or less pretty intertwined, right? I would like to see, because there is no owner's manual for humans, so we should be, starting at a very young age, we should be learning about diet and exercise and these things, and not in a way to, entrain people because we're trying to make people, with some finite choice of behaviors, but with an idea of, oh, this seems to work to maintain certain types of level of health. Not that you have to go be all athletes and all that kind of thing, but that you would understand how kinesiology works so that you would be able to choose and go, well, how much effort do I want to put into it for what kind of health returns back? Right? I mean, you see what I'm getting at? We should be helping each other. I also think, well, I'll just give you a few more rants about, I don't think this is going to be a terribly long video because, after those few things, I'm sure everybody's going, oh, you screwball left-wing nut bob, blah, 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 blah. Which, yeah, for maybe so. Maybe I'm just some weird with a beard and you should ignore me. But, because this kind of thinking, you can't force people down this path. Right? You can talk about it and we can kind of collectively go, okay, this is what we should be doing. But we have to do it together. Right? You can't do this at the point of a gun. Anyway, so my mind is kind of going all over the place. And so some changes I would like to see in things like education is, let's stop with grades. Like, A, B, C, fail, all this kind of nonsense. And we should stop with first grade, kindergarten, all this kind of crap. We should start looking at, obviously there'll be habitual things and traditional things, or, just kind of social norm things that will develop, and they can be organic. You don't necessarily have to write it down on a piece of paper. I'm not a big fan of having to adhere to written law, right? Because written law is not dynamic. Do you understand what I'm getting at with that? You run the risk of going into what I would call scripturalism, right? You go, oh, that's written down, that's the way we have to be. The problem is we end up doing that, and where you elevate the law to a place that it's more important than the people that it's supposed to be serving, and that bothers me, because people start to use that because they want power, and it's not about us taking care of ourselves anymore. It's about a small number of people taking power, because we have a tendency to do that as a species. We like shitting on each other. Maybe, it's like, well, I don't like doing that. Maybe not, maybe you don't, or maybe you don't feel that you do, but when you look around the world, it's happening all the time. So how do we get out of that cycle? I don't know. But that's what I'd like to see. Anyway, so back to the education thing, no grades and no grade level. Just teach to mastery. Like, figure out, you want kids to learn to read? Yeah, I would love for kids to learn to read. We want people literate. So figure out the best way, there's people who study these things, behavioral psychologists, education people, and, going back to people like Piaget and, Montessori, and, I'm sure that's old stuff, right? That's from back when I was in college and, hearing things, but I'm sure things have progressed much, past that. But there are ways of figuring out what kids are capable of learning and figure out the things that we need them to know, like being literate. I would like for everybody to be able to read peer-reviewed papers. Not that you have to go read them, but I don't want you to not read things because you're intimidated by the language of it. You see what I'm saying? Because that means people can pull the wool over your eyes. We should make it so that we're all equally able again, us taking care of ourselves, right? So, teach to mastery. The same thing with quantitative reasoning. I would love to see everybody educated to the level of at least integral calculus. But, maybe not everybody agrees with me, but we need to come up with what is it we expect the people to know to do when they were just walking around being citizens, and then figure out to get our educational system to get them to that level. I mean, that's, right, I mean, everything is going to come down. Well, okay, so I think I don't want to beat that to death, because to me it seems that once I've said it, it should be pretty obvious. And people are going to go, well, how do we pay for all this? Well, how you pay for it is you start being realistic in what our systems are. Right? Minerals come out of the ground. Every human has equal right to any mineral on the planet. You know what I mean? These arbitrary lines that we draw that have to do with territory and the notions, this fiction that we come up with that's about property ownership is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it makes sense in a way, but so does the rules of monopoly, right? But you wouldn't choose to run your society based on monopoly, would you? But that's kind of what we've done. It's not anything that really reflects what's going on in the real world. It's a thing that we've invented for ourselves. And largely it's reinforced because people have learned how to leverage that to be able to have power. And that, we need to mitigate the hell out of that crap. Anyway, but if you came up with a model, and just say you're a country, and then you have a particular territory, and it'll have certain features, it'll, like we have this much timber, and we have these many minerals, and, whatever it is. Get with material scientists and economists and engineers and whatever you get, and you figure, okay, so how can we model our system and our society in a way, and what is of value? I mean, you can start putting a number of values on it and using money. I don't think there's a problem with money if you use money as a tool instead of, like here in the U.S., that money is essentially a form of a god at this point, which is freaking ridiculous. I mean, it's a means of exchange. Right? And that's how it should be viewed. I mean, it's fiat money anyway, right? So we don't even really have a standard. Even when we had standards, it's really just a trick you play, right? I mean, it all comes down to money works because we believe it works, which is fine, as long as what it's a symbol of actually makes sense, right? So here's the deal. And I'm not saying everything has to be like some communist thing, whatever. You could have private enterprise in a system like this. It just has to be realistic. You go, oh, okay, we're going to take minerals out of the ground. You have to pay money into the pot to take those minerals out of the ground because those minerals represent a certain value. And if you pay a realistic value into the pot to what those minerals actually represent as a value, then you'll be able to afford these things. You see what I'm getting at? But that's not what happens, especially here in the U.S. Largely what happens is you get sweetheart deals where people get leases and things where they can take minerals out of the ground for next to no money, and then it's pure profit for them, right? I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but you get the idea I'm talking about. These things need to be realistic. And I think if we are realistic about it, and we examine it, and we're honest about it, and we don't have this fiction of these screwed up CEOs making like 1,000 times, more money than the guy that's actually doing the job. Actually, frankly, I don't like the idea of shareholders. Like people that own, like, oh, I get to buy a share of that company so that those people work and I get a percentage of the profit of those people's labor for doing nothing other than the fact that I bought the privilege for that. You're pulling money out of the system for not putting any effort into it. That can't be maintained. That's sort of like the whole sense of this like perpetual growth thing. That cannot be maintained. These things don't make sense. Just if you look at it from a point of what the real world has to offer you and how the real world actually works. Einstein and Newton, I mean, I don't want to get into being a scripturalist about science either, right? But these insights that they've given us, these mathematical descriptions that we use, they actually apply to more than just missiles and falling bodies in physics classes. You know what I mean? These things actually apply to the physical reality we find ourselves in a very broad and robust way. We as humans need to start leveraging that in a way that makes sense, again, so that we can take care of ourselves. Right? Does that make sense? I hope so. Kind of feeling like there's something else I wanted to say about this nonsense, but maybe I should leave this here and there, because, otherwise I'll just be a ranting lunatic. And I'm sure it's, well, hopefully this has been entertaining for you. I'm certain it was not very ASMR-like. But I had, it's been on the back of my mind for a long time, and since I did the video about religion, I, kind of wanted to do this one about politics. And the like, I may revisit some of these topics in the future, but maybe not, I don't know, it depends, it just, sometimes I just get too worked up and I get too angry about things. Especially given the current, political climate here in the United States, it's just ridiculous. The degree of hypocrisy, the degree of delusion, the degree of, there's a tremendous number of people in power who simply believe that most of us don't deserve anything, right? There's this it's like, it really harkens back to the abuses of power structures in the past, and it's like, really, how is it that we're tolerating this nonsense? But we are, and will continue to, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, the only way out of it is going to be by trying to find a way of using compassion, right? I mean, that's really, I know that people have been saying that for, well, centuries, right? Go back to the Buddha, or even prior to that, right? I mean, and we're still not very good at it, even though we've had countless wise men saying, well, maybe I shouldn't say wise men, right? That's, not the PC thing, but anyway, you get the point I'm trying to make. This has been a message that's been around for a long time, and we seem to not really get it. Anyway, I hope you found this useful, and I will try to be, more productive. Yeah, I can't promise that I will, but, it is my intention to, not be so screwed up and not doing videos. So I know we'll see how well I'm able to do that. Anyway, I hope you all are doing well. And again,